Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sun hung low over the sprawling city of Lumina, casting long shadows across the dusty roads. This bustling metropolis, one of the fastest growing in West Africa, was filled with shimmering high-rises that coexisted with overcrowded slums, a complex tapestry of wealth and hardship woven together. The air smelled of spices from roadside vendors mingling with the exhaust from countless cars and battered minibuses that transported people around the city. Along one of the main roads, day after day, a small figure could be found sitting near a traffic light, an 11-year-old boy named Kofi. Kofi had known nothing but struggle for as long as he could remember. He'd lost his father early in life, and his mother, a street hawker, had fallen ill and passed away shortly afterward. With no relatives able to offer help, Kofi found himself surviving on the streets, in the heart of this booming capital that ironically boasted some of the wealthiest businesspeople in the entire region. He was small for his age, wearing oversized shorts tied with a piece of fraying rope and a t-shirt that bore the faded logo of a local football club. His feet were bare, calloused from traversing endless roads and sidewalks in search of a few coins or a piece of bread. As the city expanded around him with sleek office towers and luxury boutiques, Kofi quickly learned survival skills that only those in dire situations discover. He was resourceful and quick-witted. He developed a sense of reading people, knowing which face might be sympathetic enough to give a coin, which face would rather look away, and which would scold him for begging. Though he rarely received more than a pittance, his greatest fortune was that he had his health and a hopeful spirit. He would often stand at busy intersections, weaving between vehicles stalled in traffic, with an outstretched hand and a soft, persistent "Please, anything for me?" Despite his circumstances, Kofi tried to maintain a sense of dignity and kindness. Occasionally, he found a minute to watch schoolchildren walk to classes, dreaming of a time when perhaps he could sit behind a desk and learn to read more than just the basic words he'd picked up from signs and newspapers. At night, he slept under an abandoned kiosk near a bus stop, where he had to fight off mosquitoes and the chill of the evening. The local police sometimes chased him away, believing all street kids were troublemakers. But a kindly old watchman occasionally turned a blind eye, allowing him to sleep in peace for a few hours. The city itself, Lumina, was remarkable for the way it blended modern African innovation with remnants of colonial-era architecture. Billboards advertised telecommunication giants, global fashion brands, and local music superstars. Street hawkers sold peanuts, roasted plantains, iced water sachets, and vibrant fabrics. Even in this swirl of commerce, Kofi remained near invisible, just one among many children forced to grow up too soon. On this particular day, traffic was unusually heavy because of ongoing road construction, and the midday sun was unforgiving. Beads of sweat trickled down Kofi's forehead as he moved from car to car, hoping for a blessing in the form of spare change. It was then that he noticed a sleek black SUV creeping forward in the jam. Such vehicles were not uncommon as wealthy entrepreneurs and politicians zipped through the city's chaos. But something about this one captured Kofi's eye. The tinted windows gave no clue about who was inside, but it was clear the vehicle belonged to someone with power or money. Perhaps it was the glint of the shiny rims or the careful way the driver navigated. Either way, Kofi felt a peculiar urge to approach. He tapped lightly on the passenger side window. Sometimes, luck came his way when the occupant was in a generous mood. But no one rolled down the glass. Unfazed, Kofi took a step back. That was when he noticed something strange. The driver seemed distracted. The SUV inched forward despite a huge municipal truck reversing nearby, carrying stacks of concrete blocks. Kofi saw the potential danger before anyone else did. His heart quickened. Child beggar or not, he was human, and he couldn't let a calamity happen in front of him. Without any hesitation, Kofi dropped the few coins he'd collected and sprinted in front of the SUV, waving his arms furiously and shouting at the top of his lungs. Cars around the intersection honked in confusion, but he managed to catch the driver's attention. The screech of brakes, the hiss of heated metal, and a resounding thud of the municipal truck colliding into another parked vehicle all converged at once. The SUV came to a stop barely inches from disaster. In those tense moments, Kofi realized he had done more than just beg that day. He might have saved a life, or several. Little did he know that this single act of bravery would chart the course of a remarkable new chapter in his life, and in the life of the millionaire seated inside that sleek black SUV. When the screeching of brakes finally subsided, a thick haze of smoke and dust lingered in the air around the intersection. Shaken drivers leaned out of their windows, coughing or trying to see what had caused the chaotic standstill. The truck, which had been reversing with a payload of concrete blocks, had come to a complete halt but not before lightly colliding with another vehicle. A few of the blocks spilled onto the road, causing an uproar among bystanders. Kofi stood there, heart pounding, his limbs trembling from the rush of adrenaline. He locked eyes with the driver of the black SUV, whose face was half hidden behind tinted glasses. Slowly, almost ceremoniously, the driver removed his sunglasses, revealing a pair of alert, stern eyes. Those eyes swept from the spilled cargo to Kofi's small, dusty figure standing just outside the front fender. Kofi had risked his own safety to wave the SUV down. It was only because of that frantic signaling that the driver had jammed the brakes in time. The driver turned off the engine and stepped out, slamming the door behind him. His posture and crisp attire, an impeccably tailored navy blue suit and polished shoes, spoke of affluence and self-assurance. He was a tall man, perhaps in his late 40s, with a clean-shaven head. His face carried an air of authority, the kind that came with deep pockets and corporate boardrooms. Kofi thought he looked every bit like the big men he'd seen on television, the type who gave keynote speeches and had personal chauffeurs. A small crowd began to gather, passers-by and hawkers converging to understand how a minor collision had caused such a commotion. Among them was a local traffic warden trying to organize the flow of vehicles. Everyone was talking at once. Is anyone hurt? Who was at fault? I saw it coming. Meanwhile, the driver's gaze never left Kofi. You boy, he said, voice heavy with curiosity, you saved me back there, didn't you? Kofi swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. He felt unaccustomed to direct conversation with men of such stature. Usually, they ignored him completely or waved him away. But he nodded quickly, trying to catch his breath. Before either of them could speak further, a police officer approached, scribbling notes on a small pad. He asked for statements from the driver and a few witnesses, glancing at Kofi with thinly veiled disdain. The driver, who would soon introduce himself as Mr. Adeyemi, brushed off the officer's mild suspicions about the street kid. Instead, he placed a hand on Kofi's shoulder and recounted the boy's brave action. The officer listened, offered Kofi a small pat on the head, an unusual gesture of kindness from law enforcement in this part of town, and then turned to manage the congestion. With the tension easing, Kofi noticed the hustle of the crowd start to subside. People moved on with their day, vehicles rolled forward, and hawkers resumed their calls, pure water, roasted groundnuts, soft drinks. It was as though the incident was already being swallowed by the city's chaotic rhythm. But for Kofi, nothing felt normal about this day anymore. In the swirl of dust and voices, Mr. Adeyemi turned to him again. You're a brave boy, he said, removing a crisp handkerchief from his breast pocket and wiping the sweat from his brow. You saved me from a big accident or worse. He paused, glancing around at the traffic. Do you have any idea who I am? Kofi shook his head. I didn't think so, Mr. Adeyemi said. But I owe you a big thanks. Why don't you come with me? I'd like to know more about the boy who risked his life to stop my car. At that moment, Kofi felt torn. His natural instincts told him to avoid going anywhere with a stranger, especially one so powerful-looking. Yet there was a warm sincerity in Mr. Adeyemi's voice that didn't seem threatening. Kofi stared at the black SUV, at the tinted windows which once evoked his curiosity. He thought about his meager haul for the day, a few coins lying near the roadside, likely lost by now in the rush. Then, as though reading Kofi's hesitation, Mr. Adeyemi reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of notes, and handed the child a few crisp bills. The amount was more money than Kofi usually saw in a month of begging. His eyes widened. "I want to help you," Mr. Adeyemi explained. "I'm not just being charitable. You saved me. Let's say I owe you. And I pay my debts." Kofi, unsure of the correct protocol, simply clasped the money in his hand, bowed his head slightly, and whispered, "Thank you, sir." And so, with a mixture of excitement and lingering nerves, Kofi found himself climbing into the passenger seat of the black SUV, dusty bare feet stepping onto plush carpeting. As the SUV roared to life again, disappearing into the hectic thoroughfare of Lumina, neither Kofi nor Mr. Adeyemi fully grasped how profoundly this chance encounter would alter the course of their lives. The drive through Lumina's central district was a study in contrasts for Kofi. He peered out the tinted windows in awe, watching as they passed imposing financial towers, five-star hotels, and designer boutiques. He'd never experienced such a perspective before, riding in a luxurious SUV with air conditioning so crisp that it made him shiver slightly. Mr. Adeyemi, though not talkative by nature, offered an occasional comment about the city's landmarks, nodding at a glass skyscraper here or a glistening bank building there. Kofi tried to keep his questions in check, but curiosity danced in his eyes. He spotted young men in business suits tapping away on smartphones, richly dressed women stepping out of beauty salons, and uniformed guards posted at every entrance of the upscale shops. The swirl of activity was dizzying. Even the roads in this part of town seemed better maintained, free from potholes that plagued the neighborhoods Kofi knew. After about 15 minutes, the SUV turned into a gated compound with a tall perimeter wall. Security guards in crisp uniforms saluted as the vehicle passed, opening heavy iron gates with practiced efficiency. Kofi couldn't hide his astonishment at the manicured lawns, flower beds brimming with vibrant bougainvillea, and a decorative fountain that graced the compound's courtyard. The main building looked more like a small palace than a residence: white walls, columns, and large glass windows that sparkled under the tropical sun. They pulled to a stop near the grand entrance. A valet scurried to open the door for Mr. Adeyemi, who stepped out and motioned for Kofi to follow. Taking a timid step onto the tiled driveway, Kofi tried not to gape too openly at his surroundings. Everything about the mansion spoke of lavishness and taste. He noticed a few other luxury cars parked under a carport, shiny sedans, an SUV larger than the one they arrived in, and even a sleek sports car. Mr. Adeyemi led him inside, through an opulent foyer with a sweeping staircase, gilded mirrors, and polished marble floors. The sudden shift from the noisy, dusty streets to this hushed, climate-controlled environment made Kofi feel as if he'd stepped into another dimension. He found himself unconsciously clutching the small wad of bills in his pocket, a tangible reminder that this was not a dream. They entered a spacious living room with plush sofas, a massive television, and large windows overlooking a landscaped garden. As if on cue, a poised housekeeper appeared, offering water and asking if she should bring refreshments. Mr. Adeyemi turned to Kofi, a question in his eyes. "Yes, sir, water is fine, sir," Kofi stammered, feeling completely out of place. After the housekeeper left, Mr. Adeyemi gestured for Kofi to sit on one of the sofas. The boy perched on the edge, trying not to dirty the immaculate upholstery with his dusty clothes. Mr. Adeyemi sat across from him. He remained silent for a moment, studying the boy who had just saved his life. Kofi grew increasingly nervous under that gaze, unsure what might come next. Finally, Mr. Adeyemi broke the silence. "My name is Adeyemi Atanda," he said, enunciating in a calm tone. "I'm a businessman, real estate mostly, but I also dabble in technology, logistics, a few other areas." He gave a slight smile. "And you, my young friend? Who are you?" Kofi took a breath. "My name is Kofi. Kofi Mensah, sir. I stay around the street near the big traffic light." "How old are you, Kofi?" 11. "Maybe 12, Kofi replied, not entirely certain of his birth date. Mr. Adeyemi nodded thoughtfully. "It's unfortunate you have no guardian. No school, no home. But you acted bravely today." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "And I don't believe in coincidences, Kofi. I believe in fate and paying back kindness." Before Kofi could figure out where this was going, the housekeeper returned with a glass of water on a tray. Kofi drank eagerly, grateful for the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. When he finished, Mr. Adeyemi spoke again. "I want to help you," he said simply. "I'd like to see you in school, perhaps living somewhere safe. Consider this my gift for saving my life, though I'm not sure any gift can truly repay that sort of debt." Overwhelmed, Kofi stared at the floor. He thought about how he might be able to trust this man. Was it a trick? He'd heard stories of children trafficked or exploited, lured by promises of better lives. But something in Mr. Adeyemi's voice, perhaps the sincerity, or the memory of how he protected Kofi before the police, softened Kofi's apprehensions. "I don't know what to say," Kofi replied, his voice trembling slightly. "Say you will allow me to help," Mr. Adeyemi responded. "At least, let me arrange somewhere for you to stay and proper clothes to wear. After that, if you wish to leave, you can leave." And just like that, the roots of a new chapter began to take hold. Kofi Mensah, the street-smart beggar who'd spent his days hustling for coins under the unforgiving African sun, was about to step into an entirely different world, all thanks to a moment of impulsive bravery and a millionaire's sense of gratitude. The next few days flew by in a whirlwind for Kofi. True to his word, Mr. Adeyemi wasted no time arranging a comfortable living situation for the boy. He owned several properties across Lumina, and he selected one in a secure neighborhood. A modest apartment in comparison to his personal mansion, yet it was luxurious beyond Kofi's wildest dreams. The furnished flat had running water, electricity, a working television, and clean bedding, all new experiences for a child who had spent countless nights sleeping in makeshift shelters. Mr. Adeyemi had also tasked one of his personal assistants, a young woman named Tina, with helping Kofi navigate this unfamiliar life. Tina was kind and patient, explaining household appliances, kitchen utensils, and the concept of a shopping list. She taught him how to use the shower, how to sort clothes for washing, and even offered basic lessons in reading and math to prime him for a school environment. For Kofi, it was almost too much to take in. He would wake up in the morning, stare at the bright white ceiling, and wonder if he was still dreaming. His new reality was both exhilarating and unsettling. Gone were the days of scrounging for scraps of food and coins. In this apartment's kitchen, there was enough rice, beans, yam, and even bread with jam to feed him for weeks. All these changes came so swiftly that Kofi sometimes found himself feeling a strange wave of guilt, as if he had accidentally stolen someone else's life. Despite the comforts, Kofi's survival instincts were still on high alert. He locked doors, hid some of his meals as though saving them for a future famine, and even found it difficult to sleep in the plush bed, often dozing off on the couch before forcing himself to migrate to the bedroom. Tina noticed these quirks but gave him space, understanding that a boy who had lived his entire life on the streets couldn't immediately adapt to luxury without remnants of old habits. Meanwhile, Mr. Adeyemi continued his busy schedule, board meetings, site visits, and networking events. Every so often, he'd stop by the apartment to check on Kofi's progress, sometimes bringing small gifts like storybooks or sports sneakers to see if Kofi had any particular interests. One afternoon, he arrived with a small group of associates, all dressed in corporate attire. Their visit was brief and businesslike, but Kofi gleaned that something bigger was at play behind the scenes. Perhaps Mr. Adeyemi had told his circle about the courageous street boy who saved his life. And indeed, word did spread in certain elite circles. Some saw Mr. Adeyemi's actions as mere charity or public relations. A few skeptics whispered about hidden motives, while others openly applauded him for giving back to the community. None of these rumors reached Kofi directly, but he felt the weight of expectations whenever Mr. Adeyemi introduced him to someone new. One evening, Mr. Adeyemi brought dinner to the apartment, takeout from an upscale Lebanese African fusion restaurant. After they finished eating, Mr. Adeyemi cleared his throat and motioned for Kofi to sit with him at the small dining table. "I've been looking into local schools," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "And there's one called Bellevue Academy that I believe will be a good fit for you. It's a private institution, but they emphasize scholarships for talented and underprivileged students. I know you haven't had formal education, but you're bright and quick on your feet. I believe you can catch up." Kofi's heart pounded. In all his daydreams at the traffic light, He had envisioned wearing a uniform and carrying books like other children. But the reality of joining a formal school felt intimidating. He recalled the day he peeked through a classroom window. So many big words on the blackboard, so many rules. Could he fit in? Reading Kofi's nervous expression, Mr. Adeyemi reached across the table and lightly touched his arm. I'll hire a private tutor for a few weeks. You can learn the basics, get comfortable, and then we'll see about enrolling you properly. If it doesn't work out at Bellevue, we'll find another place. But you deserve a chance, Kofi. You saved my life, and I intend to give you every opportunity you never had. Kofi nodded, a lump forming in his throat. There was gratitude, excitement, and a flicker of fear of failure, of not living up to Mr. Adeyemi's expectations, of being rejected by his peers. Still, a voice inside him urged him to try. After all, he'd outrun a lifetime of challenges on the streets. How hard could a classroom be? And so, with Mr. Adeyemi's gentle encouragement, Kofi plunged into a schedule of tutoring sessions. Tina supervised him during the day, quizzing him on alphabets, arithmetic, and simple English comprehension. Soon enough, the promise of a new path began to overshadow the anxieties of the unknown. Bellevue Academy sat on the outskirts of Lumina, surrounded by rolling green lawns and tall palm trees. The campus was a sprawling compound with multiple classroom blocks, laboratories, sports fields, and a library that was larger than any building Kofi had ever stepped into, except perhaps Mr. Adeyemi's mansion. Everywhere he looked, he saw students in crisp uniforms, white shirts, green trousers for boys, green skirts for girls. The environment was filled with the chatter of young minds, ringing school bells, and the occasional echo of a teacher's voice carrying through an open window. After a few weeks of private tutoring, Mr. Adeyemi deemed Kofi ready to start midterm, much to the surprise of Bellevue's admissions office. Initially, some administrators expressed concern about placing a child with no formal educational background into their rigorous curriculum. But once they learned of Mr. Adeyemi's sponsorship, combined with Kofi's showing of eagerness in an informal entrance test, they were more willing to accommodate him on a provisional basis. On his first day, Kofi clutched his new school bag as he stepped out of Mr. Adeyemi's car. The morning sun shone on the academy's gleaming gates. His uniform, freshly ironed by Tina, felt stiff and unfamiliar against his skin. But there was a sense of pride in wearing it. Gone was the tattered shirt he used to wear at the traffic lights. Now, he felt like a proper student, albeit one who was anxious about everything from classroom rules to making friends. Mr. Adeyemi accompanied him to the headmaster's office. The headmaster, a kindly older gentleman named Dr. Beggar, had a reassuring smile and a thick accent that suggested he'd studied abroad. He walked Kofi through the school's code of conduct. Arrive on time, respect your teachers, keep your uniform neat, complete your assignments, and introduced him to a homeroom teacher who guided him to his class. The moment Kofi stepped into the classroom, a wave of whispers rose among the students. He could feel the weight of curious stares from all sides. Rumors had already circulated. A boy sponsored by a wealthy businessman, who had reportedly saved a life, was joining their class midterm. Some believed the story, others thought it was just gossip. The teacher quickly quelled the chatter, leading Kofi to an empty seat near the window. In those early days, Kofi struggled. Although Tina's tutoring had been thorough, sitting through 6 periods of structured lessons was far different from gleaning knowledge in a small apartment. The math problems were more complicated than the multiplication tables he'd rehearsed, and the English literature assignments required reading thick storybooks. He often felt behind, flipping through pages in confusion as classmates seemed to grasp the material effortlessly. Socially, he faced an equal number of challenges. Some students, intrigued by his background, tried to befriend him out of genuine curiosity. Others saw him as an outsider who didn't belong in a prestigious institution. A few teased him for his stumbles in reading or for not understanding slang phrases that were second nature to them. Kofi's old street instincts rose to the surface, and he sometimes lashed out or withdrew in self-defense. But every day, Mr. Adeyemi or Tina would check in, Mr. Adeyemi asking over the phone, "How was school?" while Tina, in person, would encourage him with extra homework help. "Don't give up," she would say, recalling her own story of how she'd once been a shy girl from a small village who felt overwhelmed in a big city school. "You'll catch up, Kofi. Just keep trying." Gradually he did. He began to understand how to structure sentences, how to break down math equations, and how to navigate the labyrinth of school rules. The teachers, initially wary of his lack of formal education, grew supportive when they saw his genuine effort. By the time he submitted his first book report, on a short African folktale, he'd made leaps of progress. One afternoon, as Kofi sat on a bench during lunch, flipping through a worn history textbook, a tall boy named Sundiata approached him. Sundiata was among the top students in class, known for his excellence in sports and academics. He asked Kofi if he wanted to join their group in a soccer match after school. Noticing Kofi's hesitation, Sundiata assured him, "We could use someone who's quick on his feet." Kofi agreed, grateful for the invitation. As they played on the field that afternoon, Kofi discovered that his agility, sharpened from years of dodging cars and weaving through traffic, was an advantage. He scored 2 goals and earned the cheers of his classmates. It was a small triumph, but it felt monumental for the boy who once thought he'd never be part of any social group. In a short time, Kofi started to realize that schooling wasn't just about books and exams. It was also about learning who you are in relation to others, developing friendships, and finding your place in a community. And for the first time, he felt a glimmer of belonging, a hope that maybe he was worthy of this new life Mr. Adeyemi had offered. Several months slipped by, and the transformation in Kofi's life became palpable. Where once he wandered the busy roads of Lumina in ragged clothes, begging for spare change, now he spent his days immersed in textbooks, school assignments, and the whirlwind of adolescent activities. Each morning, he woke in the modest apartment provided by Mr. Adeyemi, donned a clean uniform, and rode to Bellevue Academy in a shared school van. Each evening, he returned home to tutoring sessions with Tina or personal study time, a new normal he never would have imagined just a season ago. His academic progress was noticeable. While Kofi still lagged behind in certain subjects like advanced math, his English and literature marks improved significantly. He even began participating in debates, encouraged by a teacher who noticed his knack for storytelling. One day, he gave a short speech in front of the class about the importance of community care, drawing from his personal experiences on the streets. His classmates listened in rapt silence, some coming up to him afterward to express how moved they were by his story. Yet, amid these positive developments, life wasn't without complications. Rumors about Mr. Adeyemi's generosity continued to swirl. In the city tabloids and certain social media circles, gossip abounded. Why is the millionaire taking care of a street kid? Is he going to adopt him? Is it a publicity stunt? It wasn't long before Kofi caught wind of these murmurs. At first, the uncertainty gnawed at him. Would Mr. Adeyemi grow tired of him if negative press persisted? But the man himself seemed unperturbed, going about his business empire as usual. The real challenge came when some distant relatives of Kofi's, who hadn't shown any concern for him previously, reappeared, claiming they wanted custody. They argued that he was a child from their lineage and had no right to be taken in by a stranger. The matter stirred up legal questions. Mr. Adeyemi, refusing to see Kofi fall back into the hands of those who never cared until money was involved, assembled a legal team to investigate. It was discovered that these relatives were not Kofi's immediate family and had no legitimate guardianship. Moreover, they had a history of unscrupulous behavior, including allegedly mistreating other children. Thus, Mr. Adeyemi decided to formalize his guardianship of Kofi. With legal documentation in place, Kofi's place in Mr. Adeyemi's care was secure. For the boy, it was a confusing mix of relief and trepidation. Would he truly become Mr. Adeyemi's ward, or something akin to an adopted son? The tension was finally resolved in a private conversation between them. They sat in Mr. Adeyemi's mansion garden, under the shade of a large baobab tree imported from another region of Africa. "Listen, Kofi," Mr. Adeyemi said, voice soft yet resolute. "I'm not doing this for show. If you ever feel uncomfortable, I want you to tell me. But you've become more than a responsibility to me. You've become someone I care about deeply. I don't want you to return to the streets unless it's your choice to leave. If the law requires formal guardianship to keep you safe, then I'll do it. Is that what you want? Tears welled in Kofi's eyes. He managed a nod. Yes, sir, he whispered. I want to stay. I'm grateful. Their relationship solidified. Mr. Adeyemi still expected Kofi to work hard in school and remain disciplined, but he also encouraged him to explore hobbies and sports. He took Kofi to meet business associates, philanthropic organizations, and even introduced him at a real estate conference as his young ward. People greeted Kofi politely, though some with hidden curiosity. On the academic front, the semester was ending, and Kofi's teachers reported his remarkable progress. The final results placed him squarely in the middle of the class ranking, a feat considered extraordinary given he started so far behind. The sports coach also took note of Kofi's speed on the soccer field, hinting at a possible scholarship if he developed his athletic potential. Then, on a balmy Thursday afternoon, the school organized a small event where students could showcase their talents or personal projects. Kofi, with encouragement from his literature teacher, wrote a short speech titled A Second Chance. Standing on a makeshift stage in the courtyard, he spoke of how a seemingly insignificant act of kindness, or an impulsive moment of bravery, could alter the course of someone's life. He never explicitly mentioned Mr. Adeyemi's name, nor did he delve into graphic details of his street life. Instead, he delivered a message of hope and resilience, urging others to help those in need because one day, that same kindness might return in ways they could never predict. When he finished, the crowd applauded resoundingly. In the front row, Mr. Adeyemi stood, wearing a rare, proud smile. Tears glistened at the corners of his eyes. It was a moment that symbolized the extraordinary journey they'd both taken, from the split second on the busy road when Kofi stepped into oncoming danger to prevent a terrible accident, to this day where the young boy stood confidently, sharing his voice and insight with peers. As the applause died down, Kofi found himself locking eyes with Mr. Adeyemi. In that silent exchange, they both understood that their bond transcended money, charity, or social status. It was rooted in gratitude, compassion, and a promise to better each other's lives. Kofi had not only saved Mr. Adeyemi from a literal crash, he had, in a way, saved him from complacency, reminding him of the power of human connection. And Mr. Adeyemi, in turn, had saved Kofi from a life of hopelessness and obscurity, lighting a path toward knowledge, stability, and self-worth. In modern Africa's bustling, ever-changing landscape, their story became a testament to how compassion and opportunity can intersect in the unlikeliest of places, forging a future that neither of them could have ever imagined alone. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.